Searchers were looking for this man in the days after he went missing. What do we now know?
Good afternoon, Jane. Yes, that's right. I followed this story. I was out in Tenerife, and this is a significant update. We understand that this news is coming from the Reuters news agency. We understand that the emergency services who have been scouring the area say they have found human remains in the search for Jay Slater, the 19-year-old from Lancashire. And they say that the evidence strongly suggests that those remains are those of the 19-year-old. They say that a body was found in the area that they had been searching since the middle of June, since 17th June is when Jay Slater disappeared. And then that triggered a search operation, which we saw involved a number of emergency services. Those involved drones, sniffer dogs, looking at an area of Masca in the northwest of Tenerife, which is extremely rural, extremely rugged and difficult to get to, with lots of sheer drops, lots of cliff faces and ravines. That search operation was then eventually called off. But I know that Jay's family was still out in Tenerife updating a Facebook group, which they had set up in the search and had been joined by thousands of people. They hadn't given up hope. They had made trips up and down to that mountainous region. They had put posters up in and around that town, in and around the area. And we now know that there has been this significant update in the form of a body being found. And just to come back to the events that we know of on that day, that Monday, 17th June, Jay Slater was last spoken to by a couple of his friends. We know that he had allegedly travelled from the music festival, the NRG festival, with two men to this mountainous region of northwest Tenerife, to the town of Masca, in a car. We then know that he tried to make a walk back which would have been 11 hours to where he was staying in a more central part of Tenerife. We then know he spoke to a couple of his friends. He said that his phone was running out of battery, that he had no water, and that he had injured himself pricking his foot on a cactus. That triggered a huge search operation in a case that had so much social media attention around it, so many eyeballs on it, and we now know that a body has been found in the search for Jay Slater.
Shingi, we're just getting a statement from the Spanish police. Let me read it to you in full. The Mountain Rescue and Intervention Group of the Civil Guard has located the lifeless body of a young man in the Masca area after 29 days of constant search. Given the complexity of the case, the discovery has been possible thanks to the incessant and discreet search carried out by the Civil Guard during these 29 days, in which the natural space was preserved so that it would not be filled with curious onlookers. All indications indicate that it could be the young British man who has been missing since last June the 17th, in the absence of full identification. The first investigations reveal that he could have suffered an accident or fall in the inaccessible area where he was found. And Shingi, this is not obviously yet confirmed to be Jay Slater, but if it proves to be, this is the worst possible news for his family, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, Jane. His family never gave up hope. They stayed in Tenerife throughout this month and a bit in which the search went on, and they themselves tried to chip in with the search effort. I spoke to his dad, Warren, on a number of occasions as he went to the area, as he tried to retrace Jay's steps, and he was devastated. He was extremely upset about what had happened, and what we have now is potentially the news that they really didn't want to hear. It's yet to be confirmed, I must stress that, but it will have taken a toll on his family. His mum, Debbie, has also frequently posted on social media, responded to people who were part of a crowdfunding effort to help them stay out there in Tenerife. So this is the worst possible news for Jay's family. And I think another thing there in that statement that's worth mentioning, the police saying that this person that they've discovered may have come to some form of accident and been harmed in a form of accident and had a fall. The landscape, as I have said at many points, is extremely rugged. It's extremely rural. It's difficult to get to on foot. It's a one-track road up there to get there in the car. So that, again, suggests that difficult landscape made it really hard for a person trying to get back down. This has not yet been confirmed as Jay Slater, but I think this will be the worst possible news for his family, a reminder of just how difficult and arid and rugged that landscape was, which is why the search has taken so long and it's been so painstaking.
Identification of these human remains yet, but it is reasonable to work on the theory that this tragically is the body of Jay Slater, thereby bringing to end 4 weeks of what was often conspiracy theorizing, nonsense and claptrap, and finally the worst ending possible for those who loved Jay. The facts that were known at a very early stage, in other words, at around 8:30 a.m. on the day that Jay went missing, was that he was somewhat lost. He had 1% battery power left on his mobile phone, and he had no water or other drink. It was also suggested that he cut himself on a cactus. And all those facts would indicate that this perhaps was a man in rugged, unfamiliar terrain who was clearly going to be getting into difficulties in a short space of time. Some people chose to ignore those facts as they were known and go off into wild, hurtful, damaging, unnecessary theorizing about stolen watches, getting on yachts, and a lot of other kind of drivel. Perhaps it would appear that the Guardia Civil, who were better placed to make a judgment call, bearing in mind they knew more than anyone, perhaps their initial theory was right all along. What we do know is that the Guardia Civil called upon the resources that they had available to them at the time. There was use of a helicopter, drones, dogs, a mountain rescue team, some firefighters with experience of fighting bushfires in that kind of territory, and some of the Guardia Civil's own officers. They were supplemented some days into the search with further dogs brought in from Madrid. And yes, if they had been able to mobilize a battalion of 1,000 soldiers, for example, then I suspect the answers could have been discovered much earlier. But given the resources that they had, and doubtless other priorities that the Guardia Civil have on Tenerife, like keeping the peace and detecting crime, I think they probably deployed all the resources that they reasonably felt they could do at that time. Ravines, crevices, caves, very tall drop-offs into areas that are almost untouchable, cannot be reached by people searching on foot, presents a vast challenge. And to scour every square inch of every square metre is, quite frankly, impossible. Of course, they could always have done more had they had the resources. That's inevitable that people are going to say that. But given what they had available, what they knew at the time, and what they decided was a working theory or a working hypothesis, as the British police might call it, then I think the discovery of these remains might suggest that if they weren't in the right place, they were certainly on the right track, for want of a better word. What is undeniable is that the Guardia Civil can make huge improvements in how they handled the release of information to the media and how they handled the release of information, more importantly, perhaps, to families and loved ones. We didn't see a family liaison officer, for example, being allocated to the family to help them navigate their way through the most difficult of times. And it might well be that the Guardia Civil need to cast an eye towards British policing and how they deal with the allocation of family liaison officers in situations such as this. They appear to me, the Guardia Civil, to have been somewhat anchored in the past, and a modernisation of their media strategy and family strategy, I think, is long overdue. If there is any good to be taken from all of this, it's that it has shone a light on some of the criminality that takes place on Tenerife, other Spanish islands, and around those costas in southern Spain, where gangsters from the Russian mafia to British organised criminals make their homes and commit their criminal deeds. That might, just might, make people of all ages a little bit more careful when they venture out to these places to enjoy their holidays,